Welcome back. Good afternoon. I think for the afternoon session, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Sachin Kura, who's the managing partner at Pinsent Masons. Sachin.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. The object of the next session is for you to largely try and stay awake after your lunch, so please help us out. Now, to help us with that particular feat, we've got three very talented and experienced guests on the panel. Let me just introduce them to you. At the end is Roger Nichols, who's the Managing Director in the region for Borough Happold. In the middle, Nabil Al-Kandi, who is the Arab Tech Constructions COO for the GCC. And nearest to me, Simon Crisp, who is the Commercial Director for Atkins. So lots of experience. Session's 45 minutes long, and I will be testing the panel with lots of searching questions, but there'll be plenty of time for you to do likewise. Now, we're all friends, so we're going to close the doors, and so you can ask whatever you want of them. Keep it controversial. Construction Week love that. So don't hold back. They're ready to answer anything you throw at them. So I'll start them off and warm them up. And this session, as you'll see from the program, is very much around two key markets for GCC operators, and that is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And there are various challenges and opportunities that both countries pose for stakeholders operating there, and that's what we'd like to tease out over the next 40 minutes or so. So, as I say, we're looking for the panel to give their insight and for you to come in with whatever observations you feel is appropriate. I'll start first of all with Roger, if I may, at the end. And there is a sense, and certainly as a construction law firm, we do carry out a number of surveys of our clients operating across the region. And one typical response we get from clients around Qatar is still that there's a disappointing pace of project development in country, notwithstanding the various major infrastructure programs that they have on foot there. So I just wanted to ask Roger, I mean, is that your sense of things, that things are still at a relatively tepid pace, and are you expecting to see that speed up in the near future?
Interesting. I think from our perspective, the projects that we're working on in Qatar are very complicated. We have a big project for Mashrab with Arab Tech, and it's a very difficult project with a lot of stakeholders. And it's taken a long time to create an environment where we can deliver. And then looking at the kind of large-scale procurement over the past 2 to 3 years, things like the World Cup and the procurement, the contract, the level of risk, the amount of challenge in that procurement is huge. So we would naturally expect it to take quite a long time for those things to be converted in the market. And that's what we're seeing. And I think it kind of mirrors also a particular challenge that exists in Qatar, and that is that there are a lot of stakeholders. And getting the buy-in and the engagement of all of those stakeholders is critical to the success of every project. So we're not really surprised by the rate of progress, and in some respects encouraged by the fact that time is being taken to properly understand risk and therefore make sure that's managed in the process.
And do you see therefore there being a difference between the UAE and Qatar in that respect? So if the same project was being carried out here, would you expect a different profile when it comes to the pace of the project?
I think it's difficult to see very large-scale projects in the UAE at the moment that kind of fit into the same mold as some of those big Qatar procurement issues. I'd also say that generally in the UAE, there's a lot more support around the construction process, and that it's a much bigger commercial market, and it serves a much bigger area. So there's more expertise here that is able to access those conversations. So, and culturally, they're very, very different. So it's difficult to kind of answer that positively or negatively.
I think I'd just like to add too that the whole process of the way a lot of our GCC countries are developing is a journey, and you know, different parts of the GCC are on different journeys and at different stages in that journey. So, you know, if you look at Qatar compared to the UAE, the UAE has a construction history and record that actually goes on a lot longer on these sorts of projects. And I came out here in '93, and the tallest building in the Middle East was the World Trade Center in Dubai. And so we all know that in the last 10 years there's been the most massive development that has given Dubai and the UAE a construction track record and process that is ahead of a number of the other states. So it's understandable that we're on a different journey, as Roger says, a different culture. And I think it's incumbent on organisations such as ours in this room to actually stand up and try and do something about that, not just accept that this might be a slower process in Qatar, but that's the way it's going to be for a wee while. We've got to kind of work on it together to move things forward productively.
I mean, there does seem to be a relatively high level of criticism with Qatar as concerning the rate of development, particularly around the World Cup. Now, if you look at timeframes, it occurred to me that London was only awarded the Olympic Games 7 years before it was due to commence. We're still 9 years away from the Football World Cup. Is it justified, some of the criticism around the pace of development in Qatar? From what you're saying, you're suggesting not.
No, I don't think it's justified to criticise it. I think that there's an enormous job to do. I mean, you have to also remember the UK had, again, a construction infrastructure, and a lot of that was infill. Yes, there were some big areas around Docklands that needed to be completely reworked, but we're not talking about the kind of wholesale new development that is happening in Qatar. It's a very big project.
Yes,
May I add?
yeah, of course.
Basically, I would, coming back to your question, 9 years to World Cup and how Qatar going to go there. I believe Qatar could do it because they have the energy, they have the will, first of all, and I think they have everything to make it happen. Comparing it to London, as you know, to start as a construction point of view, I'm going to look into it. To do building in UK or in Europe, there is challenges. First of all, you have the union, you have issues with the labor, working hours, and all of that. In this market, in the GCC altogether, and Qatar, I think we are more flexible. You can work 24 hours. Labor costs compared to UK is much less. There is lots of dynamics. Our airports in the region, they operate 24 hours, where in London they operate, I think, they are closed from 12 evening till 6 a.m. in the morning. So it's another constraint over there they have. But in Qatar, yes, there is challenges. If I can say in Qatar, I think there is challenges from the client side. There is a challenge from the contractor side. Main challenges we have, I believe, in Qatar, and I'm sure they will be having some of the audience are from Qatar, basically, is, which I think the biggest challenge is basically getting labor or getting staff into Qatar. It's a challenge. As an Arab tech, we want to bring more labor in there, but there we are constrained with the requirements. You have to bring X nationalities, and we all know in this construction field, there is a certain nationalities they can work on the construction, not everything. So, and we have that constraint. But I think the authorities over there are looking into it. They understand the constraint and trying to fix it. Another one, basically, from the authorities side, which we used to have in Dubai in the past, like 4 or 5 years back, is basically the NOCs from the clients. So we have an engineer to move a company in Qatar is a challenge because the NOC might not be given to this guy, which was the case in Dubai like 4 or 5 years. But it's been addressed, and I think it's been resolved. And I'm sure Qatar will do the same, or basically even better than Dubai, because the energy, and I think the guys over there leading it, I think they're smart, they know what they are doing, and they know how to go and approach their goal, which is the 2022, basically, the World Cup. The challenge from the contractor side, basically, we have a challenge bringing if I can say, the right people into Qatar, because most of our best people, they want to be in Dubai. They don't want to move to Abu Dhabi even, So that's another challenge we have. Everyone asks, good, can you move you to Saudi Arabia or Qatar? No, I want to be here in Dubai. If that's not an option, I might leave. There's another companies I can work with. So I think that's a challenge we have internally. And the third one is the cost of living. In Qatar, I think to rent in a flat or an apartment, it's compared to Dubai, to be fair, I think is 20% expensive than living in Dubai. And of course, Dubai have more entertainment, if I can say. Qatar is there, is coming up, and I think they're going to have even better than Dubai, hopefully. But now, still, I think they are under development stage. So that's another challenge we face as a contractors.
So if anybody wants a big salary package, apply to Arab Tech in Doha, Nabil. Apply directly to Nabil. Roger, in terms of, is any of that, so would you endorse any of that, particularly potentially around the difficulties you may have getting high-quality technical staff in country?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I'd also kind of reinforce the importance of relationships through these conversations. If you go back to where the process of the procurement of the Olympic Stadium, we were on the team stadium consortium there working with Populous and with McAlpine, and we'd done 3 stadia already. So we'd had a conversation and a set of relationships that we could transport immediately into that project to deliver it. Those relationships don't really exist yet in Qatar on these big projects. And so developing the relationships and mobilizing people to those relationships is key. And quality of staff is a big issue, and a big issue for us whether we're working in Saudi Arabia or whether we're working in Qatar. We're quite fortunate as a design organization that we tend to work with Zaha Hadid and Foster and all of the big brands, which means that we can work next to them in their offices in London or in their offices in Berlin or in their offices in New York and import that back into the market. So we succeed by doing that, but not everyone has that ability. And so, the critical part of project success, I think, is making sure that the critical people are brought to the teams and then you build from them. And everywhere we look at that, the metro here and how that was built up and all the various big procurements, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 critical people then build communities around them and the projects start to move on.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point Roger makes about how people have got to be able to be brought in to be at the coalface with the clients. And the contractors and the people that are delivering, but equally have the ability to bring in skill sets that are remote and use the global infrastructure for design and construction to actually mobilize into some of these countries like Qatar and Saudi. And certainly we as an organization utilize our design centers in India and in Dubai and in the UK for that exact reason, so that we can actually provide the resourcing without necessarily transporting everybody to the location. But equally, you have to do that as well. I mean, we've mobilized 400 or 500 people into Qatar over the last 18 months, and issues around education, around quality of life, an awful lot of the people that we target in our organization are people with families. And, you can't expect people to turn up for work without their family around them and really give of their best. So, again, organizations in this room, we have to look at these kinds of issues and figure out how we are going to create work environments for our family people that sustain them for the medium term in the project environment.
Just, Simon, if I can keep you, on the point of prioritization, there is a sense that what the authorities in Qatar need to do perhaps a bit more is prioritize projects. They have a lot to deliver, and it's not going to be possible to concurrently run many of those projects. Do you get a sense that that is happening, or it even needs to be done?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, that's the key to avoiding the kind of peaks that cause these really inflation-built problem areas that we have seen in the region in the past. And that key top-down planning is so important. And it's certainly one of the roles we've been operating lately is to try and help prioritize the projects just in the same way as an individual organization prioritizes its projects and its manpower. It's really important that the expertise from people that are coming into the region from elsewhere are able to bring those skills to help smooth out those peaks and prevent those kind of inflation problems that I think are potentially there for Qatar and probably the whole region, actually.
I just want to turn to the kingdom now. Nabil, what is Arab Tech specifically looking at in Saudi Arabia? What are your focus areas, focus sectors?
Yeah, I think with Saudi, I think I'm one of the people, I love Saudis, I think, as a contractor or basically as someone in the industry of development. Because these guys, they do things big, and they do the biggest. So in that sense, I think when you look into this market or the GCC market, I think Saudi market is the biggest. Yes, Dubai and Abu Dhabi or UAE is strong, and being there, the oldest, so basically compared to the other. But I think with Saudi market is strong and it's big. Like whatever they do big. For Arab-Tech, I think it's a prime market to us. After UAE, I think we believe as an Arab-Tech that the two markets we are after strongly and we want to be involved with them heavily is basically the Saudi market and Qatari market, because we believe the Saudi market can take that such development, and of course they do big. Right now we're dealing with, in Saudi Arabia, we have this development, 5,000 villas, 5.5 billion developments going in place, and we are on good track records basically on those. We have Princess Noura University development is going also 50 buildings as a dormitory and basically some accommodations taking place there. And I think soon we're going to be launching, or basically we're going to be announcing more projects in Saudi, because Saudi is the biggest one for us.
And do you get the sense that the quality of technical staff is in the kingdom is as good as everywhere else in the region, or is it better, worse, same?
I think when the quality basically, I've seen like some people love to go to Saudi. Since I'm interacting with the guys, and some people just like to go in Saudi and they want to live there with their families, but also have this challenge where some of the people, they don't want to go to Saudi. Give them anything, but they don't want to go to Saudi, which is a challenge. That's a fact of life we have. But for those who's going there, I think they enjoy it, they love it, they get compensated right. And I think they just like to be in Saudi. Some of the people, they are in Saudi, want to move them to other area, they're basically rejecting, they don't want to move. I think they're comfortable in Saudi and they just like it there. So it's a challenge, yes, for newcomer, but for people who lived in Saudi, I think they enjoy it.
Just a question to all of you, really. Do you ever perceive any bias against companies that are effectively seen as UAE companies in terms of procuring work in Qatar or Saudi? Or has that ever been an issue from your perspectives?
If I could just start with that, I think actually most of our GCC countries value commitment. And from the way we see it, it's actually not necessarily about whether you're a UAE-based company, it's just whether you're prepared to commit boots on the ground where your clients are. So, you know, again, it flows back to what I said before. You know, we need to be flexible in the way we manage our organizations so that we can have the right people on the ground facing the clients, being part of their community. You know, I always say, you know, clients actually like consultants to be within strangling distance. And it's quite important that you do give them that proximity for both the good and the bad in the way relationships develop.
I think there's a very strong set of cultural differences, society differences, and different economic drivers all the way through Saudi Arabia. You know, Saudi is a massive country, 30 million people, and the differences in culture between Jeddah, Riyadh, and back into Dammam is significant. But in amongst that, we've got some of the most fascinating and challenging projects of all of our portfolio. You know, we're doing our 2 millionth mud brick on one piece of historic restoration on one end of the spectrum, and putting solar collectors on top of a tower and a very, very modern building in another part of it. And it's that sense of opportunity that is the attraction for our people, because we can find those projects and our people will come and work and will share and commit to those projects. Our clients feel that, and we continue to build on success. But if we send people from markets that have no cultural connection or commitment, then our projects don't work, because we don't connect with the communities we're trying to serve. And I think that's so important, particularly in Saudi Arabia.
Well, for us as an Arab-Tech, basically, I think we are overwhelmed. I haven't seen this challenge neither in Qatar or Saudi. I think they see us as a UAE company, but I think they have lots of respect to us. Especially for me, I don't know, when I go there, I always, from the client side, they welcome us rightly, and they're even nicer to us than some of the clients we have in UAE. So I think both Saudi and Qatari, basically, clients, I think they're great. Yes, they have challenges, or basically they're demanding. And they are right to demand, because they are the client, and as a client, he want to demand, he want you to finish the job ahead of schedule or on schedule. The schedule is challenging to start with, but I think that's their belief, and they wanted to deliver it. So we're doing our best to come up to that program, or try to please them in that program with the challenges we have. And I think some days we have great days, they love us. Other days they just hate us, they don't want to see us. But I think that's life. So we're enjoying it.
Thank you. Roger, Simon touched on this earlier. This was around the possible increase in inflationary conditions, particularly in the Doha market. Have you seen any steps currently being taken to alleviate some of the potential difficulties that may cause?
From our experience, not really. We're not seeing significant changes in the tender environment, and leaving the market to regulate itself could be a little bit difficult, particularly on these very, very large commissions, because I think all of us, we all have some obsession on keeping an eye on the cash balances and all of the other things in our businesses today, and businesses go bust coming out of recession or coming out of environments when they simply can't deliver what they committed in today's market at tomorrow's prices. And so, I'm still very, very nervous. I don't see particular positive steps, and I don't see us as a community regulating ourselves perhaps as strongly as we should. And so, our approach to Qatar is quite straightforward. We take a very, very project-by-project approach and look at the strain that project will put on our financial commitments and also on our resource commitments, and then move forward. And we're very cautious. And, hopefully that will serve us well.
Simon, what about yourself?
I mean, Atkins approaches this, I guess, at a broader level. I mean, our work with the CPO has enabled us to see that level of prioritisation actually happening on the ground. And it really goes back to the first point about how things move in Qatar and the fact that it is taking time. And it is requiring, a lot of individual process or focus on individual parts of the program, how they work, how they connect with other pieces of it, getting the ministries to actually be working close together. For example, seeing QTA now, the Tourism Authority, starting to come into play, even though they're not directly associated with projects around road and transportation, but they're actually starting to be engaged in these potential future leisure and resort projects going around. And I think what he's focused on 2022, but there's an awful lot more to go in Qatar to meet the sort of Qatar 2030 plan. So I think we've almost got to be careful not to just get too focused on the 2022. That's a milestone in the journey. And it is for organisations like ours to try and help the government create those priorities. Definitely not say it's a perfect process, but it is better than no process at all.
Nabil, can I just ask you, Qatar has some, particularly on the general contracting side, some fairly robust contract conditions. As previously as a developer, presumably you're now having lots of success convincing the procuring authorities to change their contract conditions, make them more contractor friendly.
See, my position is quite difficult because in the past I was working as a developer, so because I was part of the development environment, and we were at the time very pushy and demanding to the contractor, and we believe the contractor is the easiest part of the job. You guys taking the biggest amount of money, you should deliver it and go on with it. So, and we don't give that as a client. I think they don't give that much attention to the contractors as much they give to the consultant, concept design and all that. They spend more time into it. By the time it goes to reality, I think they lose patience or they're just less interested to know what's happening on the ground. I think we are trying our best in Qatar and Saudi basically, and with most of our clients to basically understand the project itself. Some clients are demanding, they want this project to be delivered in 30 months, where they took designing it 30 months. So, so that's another challenge. We cannot build it in that time. But I think we're trying to work with them. Sometimes they are flexible with us. They give us the time. Sometimes not. They just want it to be done in this time. If you could do it, great. If you cannot, we'll give it to the other contractor. I think that culture in UAE and also in GCC, I think now from the client side, I think they got this understanding better. They appreciate the contractor role and challenges that he has. They listen to the contractor, where in the past, you hardly could meet any client representative or a senior client representative. But I think they're coming right now. They're meeting with us on a monthly basis if there's issues with the project itself. They came around, they do come to sites for meetings and they give some attention, they help, assist. and sometimes being hard. I think that's their role. But it's a challenge, I think, as a contractor we have taken. And some projects we make good money out of it, some projects we lose. That's a strategic move, I think, a company have to make in taking the project or being lasting in this market. So far, alhamdulillah, being great, I think. So we have challenges, but I think we're trying our best to maneuver around them.
And before I throw it open to the audience, just one question around Expo. If Dubai wins Expo 20, do you think that will have an impact, particularly in relation to UAE businesses travelling up the northern Gulf to operating in the Kingdom or in Qatar? Do you perceive there would be a few more businesses who would stay here? Or do you see that strategically it is important to continue operating in the other parts of the region?
From our perspective, I think Expo will regenerate the world's interest in this market, which I think has been challenged over the past little while. And so particularly the design organizations that we face will get very excited and will come back. So, we'll see a resurgence in interest from North America, particularly into the market, I think, and probably from the Far East as well. And that will start to drive a kind of level of interest that will benefit the region. I don't worry quite so much from a design perspective about the kind of polarization of resource in the GCC, because I think the cultures are different and the people are different in all of the territories that we work in. So I think it's a great opportunity. From a contracting perspective, the supply chain, the depth and strength of the supply chain needs to be lifted in some of the broader territories. And so, thinking about how that issue gets resolved, I'm not sure that really relates to 2020. That's my view.
Yeah, I think I broadly agree with Roger on that. I mean, I think also the market is mature enough in the UAE for the existing supply chains to be bolstered by the newcomers that will definitely come in. And then the fact that a lot of people have survived, the 7 or 8 years of recession means that a lot of business models for the way certainly consultancy is delivered do actually reflect this multi-local, sourced approach to delivering design. So whether you've got a market appearing in Dubai or a market appearing in Saudi or Qatar, if you're here to be addressing the GCC, then your strategy will address those in a managed way. I certainly wouldn't say that there'll be no impact on Saudi and Qatar if this does really start to boom here. But I think it's going to be less, polarizing.
Okay. Right, thank you. Can I throw it open to the audience for 10 minutes and then we can take a break? Yes, Oscar, do you have another microphone? There's a gentleman right at the front here.
Good afternoon. It's working? Okay. I'm Faisal Kamali. I just have a question. You focused on the client side of challenges, but I think the most difficult challenge is dealing with authorities, obtaining approval, design approvals, and all these things. So how is it when it comes to dealing with the Qatar government or the Saudi government in terms of obtaining approvals or design approvals? Or I think these are one of the main reasons in delaying projects, especially here in UAE.
Roger, can I just throw it to you? Dealing with the statutory authorities, and particularly in relation to things like approvals, how do you think it may differ in Doha than, say, here?
Well, I think in both markets, it invariably comes down to personal relationships with individuals in those organisations, and creating the culture that enables people to build on that. And in some instances, good conversation about partnering this morning. Building teams that have the right level of skill. And in Qatar, we regularly partner. We have a registered business, but we regularly partner with teams of local consultants because they have those relationships and therefore can manage the conversations. And we do the same thing in Saudi Arabia. And I think the other part of the story is that you have to engage as early as is possible, particularly if you're doing some piece of sophisticated design or something that's going to bend code or change code or reinterpret it. And so, you know, I think there's a huge responsibility on us as a profession to drive that engagement. And as long as we spend the time to understand, we can normally make things work in a sensible way. All too often we turn up on Thursday afternoon and say, I need to build this on Sunday, you must approve it, and I have a higher power authority. And if you turn up with that approach, then you know, you get shown the door. And I think that's right.
I have a question specifically for Qatar, since you're all working in it, and Roger and I have worked together in it as an architect, and now I work with a contractor, and I'm seeing the exact same situation, whether you're a consultant or a contractor. Most of the work in Qatar is government-driven. There's very little private work. The government has very onerous contracts, which we touched on a little bit. Certain organizations like the American Institute of Architects, through government agencies, have been going at it pretty good because the North American architects and a lot of the engineers at this point in time won't even work in Qatar. And I see it now with a construction company working for the government. This, beside having onerous contracts, it's the idea that you have, there's a payment responsibility on the owner's side, which never seems to be addressed on a timely manner, and they basically look at everybody as you're their bank. I'm wondering, the two of you who are consultants, and of course Atkins is British-based and Bureau Happel, you're everything-based. I know, as I said, the AIA has been really going at it as an entity trying to represent North American architects. Has there been anything like that through RIBA or other institutes trying to do something? I've never seen it, and I'm a member of the RIBA, but I'm questioning anyway. And on the construction side, Arab Tech being very strong, we might not be as big in Chapourget, but we're doing pretty good. Of course, contractors never seem to get together on this and really going at it to government agencies. Is there any, do you guys as a group or individually have a response to what do you think we should do about it, considering they're going to spend $90 billion in the next 7 years, or trying to spend it, if they ever
Should we
spend
just
it?
take that in two parts? First, the question on the consultancy side and the potential lobbying of RIBA in relation to some of the conditions in Qatar. What would you say, Simon, because you're an esteemed member of that organisation?
No, actually, I actually chair the RIBA in the region, so it's quite a timely question. We still stay well clear of any kind of lobbying on these kinds of issues. Our role as the RIBA here is to motivate and promote the quality of architecture we deliver for our customers, not to promote a commercial process to try and encourage a different way of behaviour. And I think really goes back to my first comment. You know, we're on a journey in this part of the world. We can't import our Western approach to life here. I've been here 20 years and the lessons are very clear to me. You have to develop your relationships with your client first and foremost. The contract goes in the bottom drawer, whatever it says. And it's how you deal with your client and how you make sure you deliver excellence to that client that guarantees the way you're paid. And having said that, there is still evidence in Qatar, for example, Ashgar, taking leaps and bounds to improve the way they are writing their contracts to approach international norms. But they haven't reached that conclusion because a lobby group got stuck into them. They've reached that conclusion because it's a better way to buy their product, buy what they need for their country.
Bill, we know all the main contractors do love each other. Do you all have a good hug and approach authorities?
I think for us as an Arab Tech here, let's talk about it to be specific. Going back to the payment issues, I've been hearing this, like Qatar, they're not good with payments, the payments get difficult to get released and all that. I heard about all of these stories. But on fact, for us at least in Arab Tech, because I cannot speak on about the others, we haven't faced this problem. We're dealing with one project with the government, the other one is a private investor. There's never been an issue with the payment. I think when it is the Musharraf side, the guys, we are sometimes being late as our milestones, but I haven't seen them bring the issue of payments or basically delaying on our payments on purpose. Or, in fact, in fairness, I think they are good in payments. They pay us as our program. And even with the private consult or private owner, I think he's even better than anyone else I've worked with, honestly. I think he's simple. He's a simple guy. He's a business guy as well. He said, just do my job. You get paid what the amount we discussed or agreed on. So I think payments to Arabtic, at least, it wasn't an issue in Qatar.
All right, just one more question, otherwise we'll be late and they'll take my appearance fee away. So one more question, gentleman over here.
Thank you. I've actually asked the organizer to join this session as a panelist, but it was declined. Never mind. I come from Qatar. I've been listening very carefully to all the comments raised, and I can say the following. Yes, I do appreciate the concerns raised up, but also we are there back home. We do have our concerns as well with the qualities we get there back home there in Qatar. I'll give you just a small example, for instance. Ashghal, the Authority of Public Works, appointing 5 different PMCs, and they have become a burden, a real burden, okay, and they get compensated on a monthly basis, where it should be performance-related, results-related, rather than, monthly remuneration. In addition to that, contractors as well. There are some international contractors involved in some jobs now, irrespective of the terms and conditions of contract. Some of them 30 months behind schedule, okay? And they tend to blame the system, they blame the clients, but that's not the case. They don't look at themselves, they don't look at their resources and their performance. They always try to shift, and transfer all the problems they face to the client or to their subcontractors. Okay, this is one thing. Now, I will go in line with what Nabil just stated, that we will be able to deliver the World Cup projects. Now, I disagree with employing the different layers of services to have the entire thing delivered at the end. We do have program management, we have project management, obviously design, supervision, and so on. We don't need all that. I think clients, government clients, should only have their own team and will have somebody to design and someone to supervise, and the same architect who design can carry on as the contractor. I did that, proudly speaking, with Asian Games project, and it worked very well and very nicely. And I'll be happy to receive any comments. Thanks.
Just what I'd like to pick on the one point of simplifying the professional team. Any comment on that?
I agree completely. I think as an organisation, or not as an industry, we build layer upon layer upon layer, and we have people checking people, and nobody doing. And I think that's absolutely crazy. The most successful projects are the projects where sensible relationship partnerships get driven, and the work flows from that. And I think that's about us taking a much more mature view and sitting down and taking ownership of a project for a client. And I think, coming back to your points about performance in Qatar, absolutely agreed. If organizations don't perform in accordance with the terms they've signed up to, then there should be a whole set of consequences associated with that. And as part of that conversation, we all have to be prepared to walk away. Coming back to your point earlier on, Stephen, about a situation about poor cash performance. If we get into that situation in Qatar, we don't work for that client again, and we're still doing projects in Qatar. So you can form relationships, but you have to be brave and you have to walk away. And so, I think maturing of all of our markets is absolutely key. I think the UAE has plenty to offer to Qatar and plenty to offer to Saudi Arabia as markets, but respect the fact that those markets have levels of competence, custom and practice, and that therefore what we're trying to do is to enhance and build on that custom and practice rather than impose what we consider to be our custom and practice into those markets. And so it's very difficult, but it all comes back to the same place. Build relationships, work forward on against those.
All right, thank you, Roger. Well, look, if there are any other questions for the panellists, I suspect they'll be around for a little while, so please take the opportunity to catch hold of them. Otherwise, could I ask you to show a hand of appreciation for what I hope was a lively discussion? Right, moving straight on, I'd like to now ask Roger Kelso to join me on stage as we take this opportunity in the next half an hour or so to look at the prospects for the North African market, and in particular Libya. And we're very delighted to have Roger, who is the Chief Operating Officer of R.W. Armstrong here, because it's his unique insight into particularly the Libyan market that we would like to avail ourselves of. The prospects in Libya appear promising, significant need for investment and potential large-scale financial firepower, but there are, of course, significant concerns around security and political instability, which make investment there a challenge. So I wanted to have Roger, as I say, give his insight. So I'll ask him to give an informal presentation for 15 or so minutes, 20 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to ask him a few questions. Roger has had huge regional experience and particularly has spent time in country and therefore has, as I say, a very good level of experience when it comes to judging conditions in Libya. So, Roger, can I?
No, I think while I had originally thought about more of a little bit of a talk or dissertation about Libya, I think I'll have some opening comments and then we can go into a little bit more of a dialogue because I think it suits the environment that we're in here a little bit better as I've seen some of the other presentations. I think speaking of Libya, it reminds me a little bit about making a biscuit, and I think that other people were talking about marriages, and I prefer the biscuit analogy because it keeps me out of trouble. With Libya, there's things that are happening there that are just going to take a certain amount of time for things to properly develop. And I think that if you don't allow that time to occur, just like a biscuit that you put in an oven, you jack the heat up, you open it up, and it's still doughy on the inside. I think that's what people will see if they approach Libya too quick and try to make things happen before their time. It much is a journey, as other people have talked about. And I've been dealing with Libya off and on since the revolution. I was there a year before the revolution. And I can say that there's a lot of vacillation in the government. There's ups and downs and people changing. And when you start to develop a relationship with someone, perhaps that relationship will change in the next couple of months. So when you're being an early joiner into a market such as this, patience and discipline is really important. I think developing the relationship with either officials in particular ministries or groups is incredibly important because the folks in Libya have a lot of needs, very large needs, and the projects, when you start hearing numbers tossed around, are extremely big. You'll hear numbers, they're always in $1 billion or $100 billion or something like that. And those can tend to be a bit of a siren song. And what I mean by that is it sounds very interesting. You want to get involved in it, but there's rocks on the beach that you just have to watch out for as you're trying to approach and get to your destination. I think it's key, absolutely fundamental, that you take the time to not only build a relationship, but actually get the relationship to a point to where you can be a consultant, even with the contractor, because these folks with the type of infrastructure needs that they have, not only do they have needs of the physical infrastructure, but just personnel development and those sorts of things. And so us coming from a more mature market, I think it's key for us to actually sit down and explain to people what really is the right way to go about things. Because to be honest, I've seen proposals where somebody will say, I want a 250-room, 5-star hotel. That's it. Well, that's an admirable goal, but what are all the things that you need to get to that? And sometimes the contracts are quite onerous. But when you sit down and explain to them how business really should go, when you have that relationship, a lot of times they're quite open to it. The other thing that can be a challenge is the liquidity in the market. If you don't really have the clear understanding and the relationships and understand the business practices in the region, you can get into a situation where you have substantial invoice delays and that sort of thing. However, then again, if you have the right connections and you work the connections, a lot of those obstacles can be overcome.
Thanks, Roger. Right, we'll take it from there. Well, one of the, I suspect one of the questions on a lot of people's minds is around the security situation, and obviously it does change quite dramatically from time to time. You go in and out of country so often. What's your view of the current security situation, and particularly as an international business sending people in country?
I think, you know, as over the last 18 months as I've been going on, you see a definite improvement in security going from something that was very military oriented and tight to where the last couple of trips that I've been in, and I go in on about every month to 6 weeks basis, they're getting to be more and more like a normal airport when you go in and out. I move around Tripoli quite well. However, I would say that when you get out into the countryside, when I mean the countryside, I'm talking about the east side of Libya toward Benghazi or down into the southern zones. I think the security issues are a bit more challenging at that point, and I think it's something that certainly when somebody's coming in, it's something that you need to evaluate on your own to really feel confident that you've got a good situation.
And what would you highlight as the sort of star sectors coming through? Obviously, you talked about you know, an investment deficit, an infrastructure deficit, and that was partly the previous regime and the international isolation that Libya faced. But subsequent to that, there are obviously key areas of the economy that need developing. What would you say are the sort of the highlight areas?
Well, I think basic infrastructure is the biggest push at the moment, whether it's electrical systems, their grids undersized, to drinking water, to wastewater facilities, roadways. Many of the projects that are being spoken to me right now are heavy into municipal redevelopment in the Tripoli area, and these projects aren't inconsequential. One of them is got an estimated construction value of about $500 million. Another one's really in excess of $2 billion of redevelopment. But it's all the fundamentals. It's the fundamentals of giving people in the regions just the basics of what most of us would expect on a day-to-day basis.
And what projects are you typically working on yourselves?
The projects that we're consulting on at the moment have to do with some regional airports in the area and in some infrastructure redevelopment for the Housing and Infrastructure Bureau, primarily in the Tripoli area.
And is there a sense that much of the investment is around Tripoli and not in other parts, or is it evenly spread?
Well, that's a good point. Much of, with the regional airports that we've been doing some consulting on, there are actually two of them are in the southern region of Libya, and three more of them are over in the eastern portion up toward the coast. And there is a sensitivity and a urgency for the government to be looking at developing not just in the Tripoli area. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of the Tripoli area starts to take a second seat as opposed to these outlying regions.
You talked about having the connections in country. There is, of course, new legislation which outlaws the ability of bureaucrats who worked in the Gaddafi regime to hold civil service positions. Presumably that just exacerbates the problem of the lack of capacity within the civil service.
It really causes a capacity issue, and while I can't really speak to the politics that's driving that, it's part of the reason that literally on about a quarterly basis that I'm dealing with new people in authority on a very consistent basis, that you then again have to redevelop the relationships and basically start from square one again. I think that here again, this is not necessarily a market for a beginner. I think that whether you're a consultant or whether you're a contractor, you need to have the ability to come in and supply a whole vertical set of services, because you're going to have to support yourself from the ground to the top. And I think that whether you're doing that, whether you're large enough to do that on your own or whether you're doing that through some joint ventures, I think it's very important. I think it's also very important to be tying in with the locals, local consultancies or local contractors. You will find that they have a lot of desire, but I think again you're almost going to have to play a mentoring role with a lot of these folks to help them build up their capacity so they can in turn help you.
And are the majority or all the clients government entities, or is there a private sector developing? Is there an entrepreneur base developing in country?
The entrepreneurial parts that I've seen so far are really much smaller scale and have to do with individual small-scale individual process. I would say, by and large, most of the things that you're going to see that are worth pursuing over the next 2 years, 3 years, are probably going to always have a governmental relationship. Sometimes there will be joint partnerships with other governments coming in, or investment groups, but by and large, most of it will still be governmental focused, I believe.
And how is their attitude of the authorities to international consultants, contractors? Are they welcoming, or do they have any particular concerns about the international community arriving on their doorsteps?
I think in general they're actually hungry for international input. I'm received quite well. I'm a very popular person to sit and talk to, and I'm really kind of a boring person, but people want to sit and talk to me and deal with me, and I'm always on their agenda, and they consistently talk about the fact that they want to see more international attention, more input from that, and I think they're trying their best to set things up so that can happen. The problem is, again, with some of the vacillation that you see in the government, things change, and so it's still a challenge. It's still quite the journey to get to a point to where things are completely stable.
All right, let me just throw it open for about 10 minutes to the audience. Anyone got a question for Roger on operations in Libya?
Had two experiences, first as a designer before the revolution, and that was its own challenge, especially in trying to find, I'm going to call them mature engineers and architects there who really understood what do you need in documentation. Now, with Chapourge, we have 3 buildings that, of course, had to stop, and we did everything, including allowed our construction camps be used by refugees. We did everything you can conceivably do to placate the new regime and work with them. We kept all our local employees, paid them every month, and so forth, and they kept the sites beautifully. But it's now over a year or 2 years, whatever it is, and of course we haven't started up again, and we're in a consortium with many, many other contractors like us who are still waiting for the government to decide when are they ever going to pay up and then continue these projects. I've been there a number of times in the last few months. As you said, it's so hard to create the relationship because every time I go there, it's another person. And since you seem to be there even more than I am, and you're feeling this, do you feel this will solve itself in the next 3 months, 6 months, 2 years? What is your feeling about that?
That's an interesting question because I think one of the things that we have to remember is that a lot of the folks that are in positions now, I mean, the government that's in place now is due for new elections in February. So I think that while you can make some progress at staff level and that sort of thing, I think it would be somewhat uncertain to really predict a solid restart until a few months after the election so that you could see what really turns out at that point. I think it is a difficult situation. We have to remember that they came out of a revolution. This wasn't just a turnover of a government from passing from one hand to another. And I think that in itself just represents so many fundamental issues that the time scale to resolve these things are far, far longer than what we're normally accustomed to.
Any other questions? Roger, I think is there one over there? Yes.
Thank you. Etna Trainer is my name, and I sympathize with the gentleman here, indeed many of the other gentlemen who are not getting paid. But as you said, they've come out of a revolution, but as well as that, the government's probably broke. They depend very much on their income from the oil industry to get their money. And when we look at the oil production for the last month, we're looking now at something like 250,000 barrels a day, down from 1.6 million. That's a situation that has really crippled the economic coffers for the government. And this is a situation that doesn't seem to have a swift resolution. Do you think that is holding up a lot of particularly the big infrastructure projects right now?
I think it certainly is inhibiting them from going forward with a lot of large-scale tenders. I think that also the status of the government and the fact that there will be this period of change in February or so also drives that as well. Because I think that a lot of the goals were to try to come to some sort of a stability or some sort of equilibrium during this period of time. And that's one of the basis for why I think that next year, third quarter next year is more likely to start to be the beginning of the positive results that we want to see. I would prefer not to really talk a lot about or give comment on the current oil strikes and what are going with that. I think that's a real hot potato that we just have to sit and watch. They did release, several of the agencies received a pretty good release of monies. Part of it was aimed at trying to resolve some of these past debt issues. But the problem is that's would appear to be like a one-time shot. These issues with oil, I think, speak for themselves. I mean, that is where their revenues come from.
Roger, just out of interest, have you had any insight into the thinking behind tourism, for example? Obviously, it's a hydrocarbon economy of sorts, but do you perceive that in 15, 20 years from now, Libya will have a thriving tourist Mediterranean industry?
If things go well, yes. Libya has one of the best climates and one of the largest coastlines on the Mediterranean. It's a very friendly, nice place when you deal with the man on the street. I think that that certainly is their aim. But the fundamental thing is before you can do that next layer of development with hotels and other things, you do have to address these basics of infrastructure development. And I think that's going to be one of your, if you're looking for, well, when does that happen? As soon as they can solve most of their basic infrastructure problems and the cash flows that are related in the development of that, then this tourism will happen. And they certainly do have an eye. There are several large-scale projects on the board for tourism. But again, before you can do that, you got to have some sort of foundation. You can't just start building on sand.
Any other questions for Roger before we leave it? Yeah, one last one over here. Do you want to just grab the...
LiPo, Lido, I don't remember all the names. Do they still exist, as far as you know? There was a housing entity and other entities.
Most of the names that you would recognize still exist. Whether they're incredibly active at the moment is sometimes yes, sometimes no, primarily because of the funding and how the government's distributing funding at this point. Many are just waiting to become funded again, like the Tourism Board or something like that. HIB and transportation right now, ministries, they both seem to be getting monies in. Maybe not as much as they actually need, but they're getting monies in and going through a series of restarts on various projects that had actually been active right up until the time of the revolution.
Thank you.
Okay, well, look, I think that was very enlightening. Roger, thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and I know you're extremely busy around the region, so thank you very much for coming. And a round of applause for Roger, please.
Thank you, Sachin. Our next session is what are clients looking for? And on that note, I would like to invite our moderator, George Kinich, to chair this session. He's a guest lecturer from Harvard University. George.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last session of this summit, and we're planning to discuss something which is critical and is the fundamental of any quality and any quality system. It is what the client is looking for from a consultant and contractor. As far everybody knows that most of the times we use the word that client is the king. And as per the quality systems, any kind of quality systems, quality management, quality systems, or total quality management systems, the good thing, quality systems, it is when the client is satisfied. These are the critical things in order we to know the level of the quality of our product. Either it is design from consultants, either it is product, or engineering from the contractors. Eventually, there is a lot of misunderstood and a lot of things which this specific issue always, most of the times, has problems. At the moment, we have a lot of complaints from the clients for the contractors or the consultants mostly. As per one survey here, we found out that approximately 90% of the clients are totally dissatisfied from the quality, overall quality of the product which are receiving either from contractors, either from consultants, especially from consultants. So there are a lot of things which has to be clarified in order specifically the client and the consultant to be in the same line. Practically, the consultant is the representative of the client and has to be very close to him. It's a kind of marriage. It's a kind of trust. It's a kind of thing which every of the client and the consultant, both, they have to work for this relationship in order later to deliver a proper product. So today on this discussion, I have the honor to ask our panelists, which are Mr. Philippe Dessoy from B6. It is Tom Bauer from WSP. It is Mr. Campbell Cray. Yes. And Graham Bill from Sweet Group. Good afternoon, gentlemen, in the last session. I would like, prior to start, to tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and exactly what are you doing.
Yeah, so I'm Philippe Dessoy, I'm the general manager of Six Construct and B6 here in the Gulf. I mean, we are mainly a contractor. I think I'm the only one contractor here
contractor, yeah.
in the panel. So we are a general contractor and working in building infrastructure and marine works.
Okay, my name is Tom Bauer. I work for WSP. I'm the managing director for WSP here in the region. I'd just like to say thank you very much for everybody who's here in the last session of the day. I know it's a difficult session to make it through to. For those of you who don't know too much about WSP, we're a global technical consultancy firm. We have about 500 people in region. We focus on the property, environmental and infrastructure sectors. We're involved in many projects across the region, which I won't go into. And our focus at the moment is on 4 key items which we think are relevant to this discussion. The first of those is quality, then sustainability, technology, and safety.
Good afternoon. Steve Law from Sweet Group. As you'll notice, I'm not Graham Gillan. For those of you that know Graham, I've lost a lot of weight and put some hair on. We're project managers and cost managers. We've got about 120 guys in the region, and we operate through Saudi, through Qatar, through the UAE, and as far down as Sri Lanka. I run the project management team. We've got about 20, 25 project managers dealing with a number of projects in those areas.
Hello, Darren Bellew. I'm the regional director of the UAE for Faithful and Gould. We're project managers and cost managers. We've got 2,000 staff worldwide and approximately 350 staff in region, covering 6 countries in the region. We're part of the Atkins Group, and we've been here for the past 20 years now.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I would like to start this discussion with our guest here, asking the first thing is, we know very much that consultancy involves more than service provision. It's not that more a service provision. It's also a relationship. A consultant's need to earn the client's trust and confidence. What do you think, from your opinion, are the important qualities of a good consultant?
Shall I answer that first? Being a consultant. I think the first of them is, if you're going to work for a consultancy, you need to want to serve people in terms of what you do. I think good consultancies are geared up to respond to their clients positively and have people within them that want to do that. I don't think it's good to work for a consultancy if you don't like dealing with people. So dealing with people is very important. I know trust is a major area that we need to talk about. So you've got to build that trust with your clients, and that just takes time. So for me, that takes time and delivering on commitments. I think it can take up to 3 years, probably, for trust to really be built with your clients. So look to do that. And then probably the final thing would be to say you've got to deliver on your commitments. So you've got to deliver a quality product on time and on budget every time. And that is very challenging in this marketplace. I think we all recognise that, but it is definitely part of building that trust.
I also think, just adding to that, what you're looking for is empathy. You need to get people, you're looking at individuals who can engage with clients from the outset. You don't want somebody who's coming in and imposing their way, this is my approach, my attitude. You need to have somebody that can sit with the client and get to the same cadence, get to the same level as them, to build that trust, to build the empathy, and enable the sort of delivery to flow. We're at the table because we meet the minimum requirements in terms of quality, in terms of deliverables. But it comes down to that personal relationship, and you need to look at the feedback that you get from your clients and apply that to your staff and let them understand where they need to be successful, where they can be successful, and how they can support their clients.
I think being a good consultant, you've got to be able to listen to your client. You've got to not just hear the words he's going to speak, but listen to him. What does he want from his consultant? What does he want from his project? So empathise and engage with him so you understand his problems or what his issues are. Then you can gain trust and he can get confidence in you that you are listening to him and you can solve his problems and deliver his project.
Correct. From my experience, try to, let's say, choose the consultants for big projects, for mega projects. One of the first things which I was noticed from the very beginning, what was my main, issue for me, it is how prepared is the consultant in order to come to discuss first time with a client. For me, preparation, it was, one of the critical issues. I was discussing with many consultants, which they came, because they are big names, but not prepared to discuss for the project, just because they are big names. This, for me, it was arrogant, and not showing that respect to the client in order to discuss, his own needs and his own problems. What do you think about preparation, specific, how prepared should be a consultant when he starts discussing, the first discussion with a client? Do you think that is important?
Fundamentally, it's important. You need to do your preparation. If you're picking up a new job, and I often have this conversation with people, and again, it's a personal opinion, you need to spend time, you need to research the client, you need to research the project, understand what the challenges have been, will be. Again, pick a development here in Dubai, which is the approving authority, so that you can go and talk to the client knowledgeably about what challenges they will face. Understand what their business is about, understand what their business drivers are, what the objectives are for the project, so that you can answer those questions.
Correct. It's important, as far as I understood, and as far, always is needed to be prepared properly and to understand the client. That prior to discuss with the client, first, he has to understand who is he, and to understand his culture, and to understand exactly what he's looking for. And after that, with the first discussion, with a short, question and answers between them, to understand exactly what he's looking for and what he's supposed to offer to him. This is one of the critical issues, I believe, and preparation, it is really one of the important, issues, and it's not only for the consultant. I believe that it's also for the main contractors or contractors, because we do have a contractor with us here. The level of preparation is very critical and very important. When you are discussing with a client, either it is the master developer, even it is the main contractor, whatever it is. It is not only, to give a quotation just like that. You have to understand exactly what he's looking for. What do you think about this?
Sometimes we have also to select a consultant or a designer when we have an EPC contract, for example. So what we try to select first, is based on the experience. You will not take somebody who is not, for example, working in Dubai. If you have a project to do in Dubai, there are so many interactions with the authorities. And so I think it's first, let's say, the past experience of the consultant. And then, of course, what he can deliver, if he has the people ready to start the work. Usually the design starts the first day, so we have to be ready and not to start to lose 1 or 2 months. He starts to put his team together. So that's the 2 criteria usually we are looking at first.
Correct.
I think, George, also, this day and age, it's very easy to find out who the clients are, what his problems are. Social media, Google, the internet, you can find out specifically who the client is. So to go to an interview and meet a client that you don't know who it is, I think that's just a no-no. You just turn him off straight away. it's very easy to do some research and background and find out who he is. Once you engage with him, then you can find out what his problems are. But that's the first step.
You know, this is a problem, you know, I understand, you know, that you found, you know, who is he after, you know, the contract. But that's exactly what is diligent, you know, which I'm searching, you know, to find out. Whenever you say preparation, it's not preparation only, you know, on the project itself. It's to understand the client, to see what is, you know, his background, what is his, for example, his financial, you know, background, so many other things. How he behaved with the previous works, you know, similar like that. What problems he's having, you know, something like that. This is the diligence which I believe that it's important, you know, to have a successful, you know, relationship with the client and to deliver the product. It's critical because sometimes you think that somebody is big and financially he's not. And then you are in trouble, or both of you are in trouble, or you cannot deliver, isn't it? This is the diligence, I think, which, you know, should be, you know, on the side.
Can I just add a couple of points there, George? I think understanding our clients is very important, but actually is also very challenging. We are dealing with many clients day in, day out. We're dealing in an environment here where things change rapidly. Meetings are organized with the best intention for them to happen, say in a week's time, and then they happen in 1 day's time, and you're expected to go to those presentations and speak knowledgeably about the subject that you're presenting on, and you haven't had the time to do the research that you'd want to. So for us, it's about engendering a culture where the whole organization is trying to learn and trying to learn about all of our clients, so we're all ready on the spur of the moment to resolve client challenges that they have. I think the other thing is, and it was just mentioned here, is we're a people business. This whole industry is a people industry, and so it is about people-to-people relationships. And the facts of life are we don't all get on with each other. So I think as any consultant, one of my jobs is to try and make sure we match our people with people within our clients' organizations who will get on with each other. We have a framework in terms of our culture, but we're not completely rigid. You know, we have a bandwidth of culture, and we've got to make sure we find people who fit within the culture of the individuals who are at the client organizations as well.
Correct. I want to ask you something which is related with the management client's expectations. It's a critical skill in delivering good quality of work, which both are happy with, client and the consultant. Client expectation tie directly into the level of satisfaction of client will receive from consultants or contractors. As per your experience and your opinion, what are the important things to be done or to avoid in order to deliver the work as per the client's expectation? The critical issue is that many times from the client of the consultants, we are having over demand or over offers which are much more than can be delivered. That means everybody has to propose something which can deliver. How really, what is your opinion about leveling really the expectation of the client? And how critical it is in your work?
I think it's been said already. If you promise to do something, deliver against your promise. Don't over-promise and under-deliver. If anything, under-promise and over-deliver. And I know it's quite buzzwordy, but that's what it comes down to. So understand what the client's expectations are. You need that empathy. You need the trust for them to divulge what their expectations are to the level of detail. And then deliver against your promises. Time and again, you set yourself, I'll get you that for Thursday. And come Thursday afternoon, you're nowhere near finishing it. So you deliver it on Sunday. Well, you set the expectation of Thursday, and then you failed against that. So you set reasonable objectives, reasonable targets, and deliver against those. You manage expectations.
I think what we try to do is it's that client engagement. You might have your project team there that's dealing with your client on a regular basis, day in, day out. It's having that management level that can go in and have a coffee, speak to the client, say, are we meeting your expectations? It's regular engagement at a senior level. So you're managing and measuring your performance against the expectation. And if it's a monthly or weekly or whatever that meeting is, you can quickly correct it if you're underperforming or there's expectations that misguided, he's not happy with you. It's having the team and having somebody above that being able to engage with the client. So you're measuring your expectations all the way through that project.
Correct. Something which should be avoided in this, in this discussion with the client. What do you think that should be avoided when you start discussing with the client, when you have, the first session with the client, and you try to get the trust of the client? What do you think that has to be avoided?
Well, I think one thing would be over-promising. Would be something that we have to try and avoid, and it's quite easy to over-promise. We all set out to say the thing we want to say to people, but the circumstances of a discussion mean that we often say things that we didn't mean to say, let's say. So we try to develop, again, a culture where people are empowered to say what they believe is the right thing to clients, and if they believe a client's expectations or ambitions or intentions are unrealistic, then we hope our people would say to them they're unrealistic and try and give them help to come up with more realistic expectations that we could deliver on, rather than saying, yes, we'll do it for tomorrow, knowing full well that we probably won't.
How do you try to explain to the client what is realistic and what is not realistic?
And that's also very challenging. We all operate in different spheres in terms of our organizations. There is a good reason why some of us are consultants and some of us are clients and some of us are contractors. We tend to migrate towards those organizations that we feel we fit into, and we don't really understand what other organizations' challenges are. So, as hard as we try, and we try hard, it's sometimes a struggle to understand our own organizations. To try and understand multiple client organizations is challenging, but we have to keep working hard at doing that.
Yes, as far as you know, most of the clients, they would like to have in half price and in half time. Have you
half quality or one quarter quality?
Quality, probably, I'm not talking about that. But this is something which is very common. Wherever you see that suddenly a client is wake up and say, I want to do it now and tomorrow, and half price. How really you are dealing with him in this specific thing without being arrogant, without showing that you try to overwhelm him, without to show that you are no more than him, and he has no idea about all these things.
I think
not embarrassing him.
No, I think you can deliver something to your client. It's having that mature conversations where if you want this, you can have that, but it's not the quality of whatever you expect. You can have something tomorrow, so you can give him something that he can have as a substance that he needs, but it's not going to be the quality of what he expected. So it's having that conversation of what is key to what you want. This tomorrow, or do you want it corrected, checked, quality a bit later? And it's being able to stand up to him and have that conversation with him, whatever level of staff that's engaging with your client.
It comes back to it again. Don't set yourself up to fail. Don't promise to do something that you can't ever achieve, or you're reliant on somebody else delivering something and you know that they will fail, that you set yourself up.
Correct. I think, face-to-face discussion is critical. And with everybody, in order to explain to him in the proper way, a scientific way, what is the reality and what's supposed to be expected. I think it's the same for the contractors.
I mean, the problem, of course, for the contractor is coming after, when the consultant, together with the client, has already defined more or less what he wants. So there is already, let's say, a time frame on the table, there is a budget on the table, and then the contractor has to put a price against it. So what I would say for the contractor point of view is more to manage the planning of the project and the budget. I mean, we know that clients have budget, try not to exceed their budget, so is to look at value engineering and of course without compromising too much on quality and safety.
How is the way of you to explain to the consultant or the contract or the main contractor that this specific quality or this specific work which they're looking for and they ask for at the beginning needs these extra works, which nobody's accepting easily extra works. The client will never accept extra work, extra cost, extra time, and all these kind of things. And really how you will explain properly in order he to understand it, and after to be in line with you without being against you.
I mean, the problem we are facing sometimes is some client doesn't want to understand. They just have a budget and stay within their budget. So even if there is some issue on the project, they prefer to go ahead, award the project to a contractor who maybe overlook a few issues and face the problem later on. We try to be more open and to see the problem, to discuss it before we sign a contract, and then, let's say, if there is 2 or 3 months missing into the tender, we go to the client and try to get some extra time.
But I think, sorry, just from your perspective, you've got to be reliant on the consultants having done their job properly, having advised the client correctly, designed it correctly, designed it fully, so that when you receive your tenders, you know, the consultant, the design team, the client will have lived for a project for months, even years before it gets to the contractor. And yet we give a contractor 4 weeks to get up to the same level of understanding. It pushes him back into a corner that they're going to, when they uncover faults, problems, it's going to be after time. Once they get up to speed, which is generally after they're appointed, they don't get sufficient time at that point. So again, you're reliant on the consultants doing their job properly, understanding the objectives and clearly communicating and having those mature conversations with the client and bringing it all to the same point.
I mean, the major problem usually contractors are facing is a coordination problem. When a consultant has a sub-consultant doing, for example, electromechanical works only on a building, usually there are some clash then with architecture or with structure sometimes. So okay, that's a problem contractors are facing, and usually the client doesn't look at these type of details.
One of the fundamental in sustainable systems, it is all the stakeholders to be engaged from the very beginning in order to meet the final product as it is. Are you involved in the beginning of the design with the consultants and the contract and the client in some critical problems, or have you ever been asked what is your opinion, or personal your professional opinion, you know, because you are on ground, you know, you are working on ground, from the consultants, which mostly are working, you know, on the papers? Have you ever been asked to be from the very beginning on this?
No, I mean, it's very rare, I think, here in the Gulf. There is very few discussion before a tender is released between contractors and client and consultant. I mean, it may happen once every, I would say, 20 or 30 projects, but it's very, very rare here. I think that the mentality is not working like that here. I mean, it's more cost for the time being, I think, who matter.
Well, there's the problem which we are facing then. We do have around 90% of the survey which we do have, which 90% of the clients which are complaining against, you know, the final product. Either there are delays, either there are, you know, problems in the budget, either there are problems in the quality. Mostly it is delays and cost. And after that comes, you know, the quality. Seems that this communication between all the stakeholders somehow it is not 100% intact.
George, was that a survey in the UAE you're referring to?
Well, yes. We have a survey which is in the United States, and eventually we did, you know, a survey as Harvard in the Gulf here, specifically for the expectation of the clients. And we find out that many of the clients are complaining for many reasons. This exactly, I believe, is the main problem which is existing, is the communication between its parties. In Harvard, we're too much human-centric, means that we're too much concentrate on human beings and the relationship between human beings. Do you believe that talking, discussion, being together, you know, having quicker meetings, not every month or every 2 months, would help in order all of you to deliver a proper product in a proper time with a triangle of engineering triangle, which we call it. And now it's not only triangle, originally, and to be sustainable also, except of cost, price, and time. Quality.
I mean, if I can answer, I mean, a good example, I think, where there was good cooperation between client and contractor was the Ferrari experience of the theme park from Aldar. I mean, the first design was done with a classic, I would say, steel structure for the roof. And together with Aldar, I mean, we have changed the steel structure into a space frame. So it was buildable first in the time frame given by Aldar, and it improved quite a lot the aesthetic aspect of the final product.
I think you are involved in as a sales suite for this project. For Ferrari, work inside.
Yeah, that was before my time, unfortunately, so I can't comment.
So it is critical, I believe, this communication channel to be always always on, always on. From the very beginning, critical it is, as I said, it is this stuff. And in order to be sustainable, it is really this part to be formed from, this communication start to form from the very beginning, not in a later stage, not in, wherever, everybody wants and wherever he has a problem. It's human nature in order, when there is a problem, some people, they try to hide it or, they avoid, to discuss with a specialist inside. But as long as they are very close, immediately, they are passing through the problems and they are solving on spot. This exactly, which is a critical part, which always I found out that it was, a weak link, in the whole project inside. Nevertheless, I do believe that really the communication is important. Now, I would like to ask you as a professional, for professional servicing firm, I would like to happen, one survey, which they try to find out what is the values which the client believe that is the best for to choose a consultant and contractor. I will give you some of those, just to tell me exactly your opinion, and a little bit, to try to elaborate further on this. For consultant, first of all, it is the consultant firm size. Is it count really that a big firm, a big firm, like one of the best top 10 in the world, are really the best and are eligible to take all the works? It is the reference of the clients which they do have. For example, they're coming one big consultant and say, I have reference from everybody around here, or no references. It is the total cost, the project cost, or the pass-through cost. It is the experience of the firm, or the project experience, the project team experience. Which do you think that is the best value which can give for all this thing?
I think it really depends on the client, the complexity of the project, and if it's a complex project, we're working at Jeddah Airport at the moment. We're doing the project management for that. It's a big project. I think it needs a big firm to deliver it with the capability worldwide to be able to pull those resources together and deliver that. I think on maybe less complex projects, clients will look to the particular people who you put forward as that project team. So it depends on the specific project. But generally what I'm finding now when we go and speak to clients, when we put proposals together, they look for who is in that bid, who's in that proposal, and who's the team that are going to deliver that, and what are their specific capabilities. And that's key, I think, what the client is looking for at the moment. And you can show that you've got all that support from the rest of the world, rest of the business, but they're looking at the individuals in that bid.
What I would like to say here is that the people are doing the project, not the firms. So I believe that for me it's not that much important, how big is the firm, of the consultant, as long, he will deploy on site, irrelevant people. For me, the most important thing, it is on site to be specific, specialized, and experienced people. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, George, for us to operate a consultancy firm that can offer those people to our clients, we do have to be of a certain size. Take WSP, we're offering around 20 different services, and in order to have some critical mass in each of those services, we do need to have a number of people, and we also need to operate a business that is attractive to engineering and technically focused people out in the marketplace, so they want to join WSP, because that's the only thing that then allows us to offer those services to our clients. I think in terms of the list of 4 that you read out, I think they're all important, and in my experience, if you tick one of them in terms of satisfying a client that one of them has been resolved, then the next one becomes as important. So it is about making sure that we cover all of the items that are certainly on that list.
Correct. The same thing it is for the contractor inside. It is critical, really, the team or the critical mass, as Paul said, for the project team to be up to the project. And experienced people which they have experience from the same, in the same area, not from different places, understand the culture of the area, the environment, and to know exactly what they are doing.
I mean, a measure of this success, I think, is the number of contracts you can get with a client. So you can get repeated order from a client. Usually it means the client is satisfied. So what we try, I mean, okay, you said experienced people, but we need also to employ young engineers and young staff. So of course, I mean, at the end, we need a team which is mixed for the best.
Well, gentlemen, I would like to ask your opinion and your questions specific on the subject, and what you would like to ask our panel for this stuff, please.
My name is Amr. I work for the Ministry of Public Works. A few things which we wish for the consultants to actually try and avoid one of them is to maintain minimum work quality requirements regardless of the client-owned standards. In other words, not to take advantage of the client's limited knowledge, because we have seen international consultants' work quality differs when offered to different clients. When we check with different clients, we expect from a respected consultant to deliver to this almost to the same standard, not to provide something much less in quality than from client to client, taking advantage of the client's own experience, limited experience. This is one. The other one is consultants should respect and adhere to their professional opinion, regardless of the pressures put by the client or even the contractor. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. Third thing is consultants should stick to their specialty and not to endorse work out of the client's trust, work that they've never practiced or they don't know about. And we've seen cases, where consultants endorsed works and put the client, at the end, they put the client in trouble, and it was totally out of their own knowledge or experience. So these three things, we wish to see the consultants to truly respect and, avoid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think just want to say thank you to George and our distinguished panel. I'm conscious of the time that we've kept you here for a long time, and I really just want to sum up very quickly. Just wrote a couple of points in my closing remarks. Really just wanted to pick on the point that one of the participants here from Qatar mentioned, and that is, the payment issues was repeated many times. I have to really 100% endorse what Mr. Al-Ansari, I think if I'm right, said. It's the delivery of the project mechanism. And if anything can be done on that front, it will help everybody hugely. It isn't actually when the payment invoice goes into the ministry that it gets held up. That gets paid within a week or two. It is the approvals by PMC and design. So an alignment between PMC and design companies will really take us a long way forward. And I see that is the detriment to much of some of the work and the progress. So that's perhaps something that can be followed on maybe in a different forum. I think from the conference today, really, in terms of talking about business, diversification, client service, really at the end of the day, I guess risk management was the big theme. How we manage risk, what is our appetite for risk, and what is the reward for that risk. And I think the more we understand risk and reward as companies and as individuals, I think the better or the more likely to be a success. Truly to say, probably general good optimism in the marketplace, but encourage really caution as well, because it's still, I think, early days. I think the world economy is still fragile, and there are issues in the Middle East that are still numerous, And I have to say, I always tell my board in London, don't ask me about predictability of the Middle East market. That is one thing I cannot predict. I can predict London, I can predict the USA, but truly I cannot predict Middle Eastern markets as well. And I think, it's great that the private sector is growing. I think that will offer a different angle. It's faster, normally more agile than, having to rely all on government-type work, which is normally tend to be very large in size, but perhaps marred with more bureaucracy, slower payment, slower approval, etc. I think the private sector certainly offer a faster return and a much more challenging and exciting sometimes. At the end, really, I think most important, I want to really thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I would like to thank George for chairing this session, Sachin Kura, and of course, I'll thank myself too. And really, thanks to the sponsors, but a very, very special thank to Oscar Wendell, who, with his team at Construction Week, done a really fantastic job with very limited resources. So with that note, please join me in thanking Oscar and his team for such a great conference. Always, say thank you very much and travel safely. Thank you.